Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We are here today to talk about the 1999 spy comedy film, Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me, directed once again by Jay Roach, starring Mike Myers. This is a film very near and dear to our hearts, and, we've started the Austin Powers trilogy, starting from last week with International Man of Mystery, and of course, next week we're going to have Goldmember, but this has just been really fun going back to these films. We're kind of on a trend on the channel at the moment. We're going back to a lot of these old nostalgic films to us. We've started the Spider-Man reviews as well, pre-recorded. And obviously we're in the middle of Austin Powers hype, I guess. It's a nice little epilogue after the James Bond stuff. We're kind of in the same vein of stuff. And obviously later on after the Austin Powers films, we'll be moving into Johnny English as well, which will also be a nice little treat. But before we jump into the review for this one, over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So we want you to comment along with us tonight. If you're watching this on demand, we're not a real TV program. If you're watching it after it's up, go comment. We'll reply. We do reply to comments on the channel. And of course, as Chris said, this is 2 films in. There's one more to come next Tuesday. So hit the subscribe button, turn notifications on if Austin Powers is your thing. If it's not, we've got a whole Bond playlist, and there's a link in the description to have a look at all of that. That's why we're doing this. That's why I've got the parody on the logos, because this is one of the most famous parodies. So we want to hear your thoughts on the film site. And as always, if you're new to the channel, if you don't know what we do, obviously we're a film channel and we've got so much stuff happening. We'll go over it fully in depth at the end of this video. But the best way to find out our videos and when they're going to go up is getting this on social medias: Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. And we have a link to TeePublic in that description below. But no, we are here talking Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. Once again, going through these classic films. And I'm going to hand over to Chris. So last week we spoke about our memories, I guess, with the kind of trilogy, or if you remember the films. And I know that this is the one that you remember the most and have definitely seen the most.
Absolutely. I have probably lost count the amount of times that I've seen this film over the years. Even before rewatching this film for this review tonight, I think I might have watched this like a year and a half ago, maybe before then. So it is still fairly recent. It's not like some of these films that we review where we haven't seen them for, like years upon years upon years. This was kind of and I don't know if everyone else had this. I mean, I certainly had this. It was kind of my going to bed or going to sleep film. Like, I'd put a film on at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'd be watching it, and if I fall asleep during it, that's okay. That's fine. It's a film that I'm comfortable with, that I've seen loads of times, and it's just one that might be kind of partial background noise or just something familiar to have on. I still kind of do it now with some films, in all truthfulness, but yeah, this one, and by that I mean this film would go on every single night. I had this on VHS along with the other 2 Austin Powers films, but this was always my favorite. And I kind of have vague memories of watching this film for the first time. I think I caught it on TV late one night. And the one scene that sticks out in my mind, and I don't want to jump too far ahead to favorite scenes, but this is certainly one of them, is the whole Will Ferrell altercation and falling off the cliff. I'm still alive, but I'm very badly injured, that whole thing. And I just remember almost crying with laughter at that scene from a very young age. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. So that scene definitely stuck in my mind from watching it on TV. And then obviously I probably just picked it up on video some point after that. But when I think about it, the hype for Austin Powers that I had as a kid, I mentioned last week that I had like a little handbook kind of thing, which had all the different characters, terminology of Austin Powers in there, all the props and everything. And for this film, I actually bought the soundtrack. I had the CD for this film. And I don't know why I bought it, because I think I only bought it for one song on there, to be honest, which was Madonna's Beautiful Stranger, which is a fantastic song as far as I'm concerned. And, there are a bunch of other songs on there. You've got My Generation by The Who. You've got, what else? American Woman by Lenny Kravitz, which is kind of a main song in the film as well when we're introduced to Felicity. But I only ever remember listening to Beautiful Stranger, so I bought a whole CD for one track. I guess I was kind of frivolous with my pocket money back in the day. But yeah, I would go to this film all the time. This was like my pick-me-up film. This was my good time film. And it still kind of is. Certainly, like, me and my best friend, we have like a really stupid sense of humor when it comes to comedy films. We love the scary movie films. We love Norbit, Nutty Professor, stuff like that, like really dumb, funny comedies that have stayed with us since, we've been kids. And this was absolutely one of them. And we still quote this film like there's no tomorrow between the two of us. A lot of great moments from this one. So yeah, a lot of memories attached to this, which I love about it.
Yeah, mine's the same as last week. I'll say it again next week. They just blend into one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just see because of all the characters there are, and I've wanted to go back to. I've not seen this in probably 10 years plus, but
Oh wow, yeah,
it's
that's
synonymous that you see clips of it, you see gifs of it as well. So Austin Powers one of them really where to me it's in that I didn't watch it anywhere near as much as like Zoolander, Dumb and Dumber, those kind of comedies that I grew up with my sisters. It was just none of them really into it, so we never had these on VHS or DVD or anything. This would be like if it's on TV, we'll get the chance to see it. Whereas obviously all the others would watch those on repeat. So it's been amazing to go back to again post Bond. I think it's been the big thing. This one's certainly more 70s esque Bond. I know some of it's set in modern day, some of it's set in 69, but it's going for the Moonraker parody stuff. But as far as the comedies go, you know exactly what you're going to get with this film. If you've seen the second one, you'll be watching the first. Well, you've already seen the first one if you do it in order or whatnot. So it's one of those comedies where it's really hard to not know about it. Like it's not hard to guess what's going to happen, and we'll get into some of the characters later. But some of the characters introduced in this film are so iconic to these films. You would think this was the actual first Austin Powers film, and I was surprised last week when I went back and I realized that Mini Me and Fat Bastard aren't in those films because it had been so long since I watched them and they all ingrain into one and they're in the third one. But they're so recognizable with these films. And I guess that kind of like doubles it for Bond, right? How many Bond films can you get away of recognizing the wrong character when you're at a younger age? I think and it's that kind of thing. And just I don't have massive memories with it, but it was a lot of fun to watch. It was a Saturday morning as well. I think I did the first on the Saturday and the second one on the Sunday. So I did them both pretty much like a day apart. First thing, as soon as I woke up, perfect pick me up for the weekend each day. But it was just a lot of fun to go to. And people, not that they don't speak about these films anymore, but because there's never been a fourth one, I think there's a lot of people that have missed out. And it's really quite sad when you think about that because you can get these on Netflix and stuff, and obviously we've had a new Bond film out, so more people may have gone looking for them and whatnot. But it's always fascinating seeing those conversations about where's this comedy been, or I've just seen this. When people watch a comedy you love for the first time, it's like wow, like you've only just seen that film. I kind of feel like this, but with Austin Powers, I think it's one that not as many people have seen it than I would think. Certainly, older people have. I want to say not the generation above us, but you got to think teenagers in the late 90s. I'd imagine this was probably as big as maybe The Hangover was to us.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And I mean, I can't vouch for like the current generation, but certainly our age group, I think we've all been clamoring for a fourth Austin Powers film. I distinctly remember, Goldmember comes out, and we'll get onto our review of that next week. Still has its great moments. It's probably the weakest one of the three. I think that's fair to say, but it definitely has some great moments. And even when that film came out, right after that, we were like, well, when's the next one? There's got to be a fourth one. He's still hitting his stride. Like, come on, we're ready for another one. And every few years or so, you'll get some kind of rumblings like, oh, and Mike Myers has talked about possibly putting an Austin Powers 4 in production. It was 2002 since Goldmember, and we're still waiting for one, So I don't know. I think I don't know if one would be successful now. That's the question. You'd have the nostalgia of people going to see it, but unless they go with a sort of modern Bond angle and make it a parody on the Daniel Craig ones, as we've mentioned, I don't know how relevant Austin Powers would be now. Would Mike Myers' shtick? We've got to remember he's a lot older now as well. It's been almost 20 years since that last one. And that's not to say that you can't do a sequel to comedy films, so many years after the fact, but how many of those comedy sequels actually work? I'm thinking Dumb and Dumber 2, great to see them back. Wasn't that great? I'm trying to think of some other comedy sequels. There's been a few
Zoolander
that crop
2.
up. Zoolander 2. I know you enjoyed Zoolander 2, but the majority of people, didn't care for it as much. And there's a few other ones that crop up as well, and they never kind of capture that same line. In Coming to America 2 recently, which we both hated. We couldn't stand that film, and that was the same directors, I think, wasn't it? And same actor coming back and sort of crew behind it a little bit as well. They're very hard to get right. And I think with Austin Powers, it's just, is it a product of the 90s into that early 2000s mentality, and would it work now? And I guess that's the question running through Mike Myers' mind, maybe, and maybe that's why he hasn't done one. I don't know.
I think it's a very good question. It's interesting because I'm trying to think. Has there been a Craig parody? Not necessarily film wise, but Johnny English, I guess, took the mantle, and there was a couple of them, but they were never really as big as Austin Powers was, and the sequels sort of didn't really work, which
I
is
think
why
the
they
only thing I can think of, and it's not like a parody of the whole film, it would be Deadpool 2 with the opening
Kingsman,
titles parodying the Skyfall
yeah,
intro or something.
Kingsman as well. I think that's the
Yeah.
nearest you can get to parodying modern day Bond, and that's it's interesting because I think when you're in the 90s, obviously it's only Bond's only been around for 30 years, and you've got the Brosnan era, which is the most 60s, not 60s S Bond, but it's more old school. Like
Mhm.
here's an episodic adventure. I mean, it still was episodic adventures back then, but something about the Brosnan films, because I think Moore was obviously so old, that being horrible. Dalton films people haven't took to yet. I think they were clamoring for that 60s, and I think it was still fresh enough for everyone that they had the VHSs. They weren't necessarily old films. It's like 80s films today is kind of what the 60s, I guess, would have been in the 90s. And it's really interesting seeing how much the sort of cinema stuff's changed in the 20 years since then. But Austin Powers is an interesting one. I think there's a story to tell.
Mhm.
It's not my job to obviously do it and just say things, but that kind of angle is something you could do with a film. Like, how does the 60s spy fit in modern day? But it's whether Myers ever want to do it, I guess, is the big thing, because the Craig films are so, I guess, postmodernism, like getting into that film stuff, that it's hard for anything to try and parody it without it looking ridiculous, because I think the Craig films stand out so much compared to others.
Mhm.
And I think because the Craig films are nothing like the other Bond films, it makes it even harder to parody now than it was back then. Whereas if the next Bond goes back to being episodic, it'll be so easy to do it once more.
Yeah, and I'm honestly surprised he hasn't gone back to it, because usually if an actor has, a comedy actor has something successful, they follow it up with a bunch of projects that don't land. They tend to always want to go back to, their grassroots where they started kind of thing. And, looking at some of the other ones he did post Goldmember, you had Cat in the Hat, which I ashamedly went to the cinema to see. There was The Love Guru as well. There's a lot of these films, and
I
then
saw that
the
one.
Shrek films. You had like Shrek 3, Shrek 4, which it's a voiceover, and he's not necessarily doing a bad job. But Shrek 3 and 4 kind of died a death, very much, I would say. After Shrek 2, the franchise just kind of went down the toilet a little bit, and since then, I haven't really seen anything he's done. Obviously, we mentioned that cameo he did as Doctor Evil, and when I did see that, I thought, right, there's a glimmer of hope there. There's something there, the seeds of something there, but I don't
I
know. It's all
think
speculation.
he was in Bohemian Rhapsody, wasn't he?
Oh God, yeah,
But
I think he was. Yeah,
but I don't think it was like a comedy role. I think it was a genuine type role, and I know that he was also in. Oh
Inglorious
God,
Bastards. He was in as a cameo in one
yeah,
part.
he was in something. I mean, it's only documentary. I don't really know if that counts, but he was in the Edgar Wright Sparks Brothers documentary this year.
Hmm.
Um, and then he was also, I think he's in the new David O. Russell film. That's the one with the insane cast that I think's got like Christian Bale in, like Rami Malek. It's like a cast that just didn't. When you get these films
Yeah,
where they
yeah.
had 10 names and they had another 10 names and they had 5 names, it's one of those that's just like disgustingly massive to cast. And I hope we get more from him, because I think he can still do comedy, and so much of it is his own. Is it him not wanting to come back in case it doesn't work? Or is it him not wanting to come back on the fear it might not work?
Hmm.
But it could, and he might not know it. So it's a tricky one. I think if the day he says he wants to do it, the funding will be there. That will
As I
get
say, well,
funded quite
Warner Brothers
easily.
seem to think there's still something there because of that cameo in Space
Yeah,
Jam 2, remember? Where which was probably the only bit that I think we laughed at in that film, and it took Austin Powers to do it. So, if Warner Brothers still thinking in 2021 Austin Powers is still relevant to get a joke in a film, then maybe there is room for more. But shall we move into the discussion on the Spy Who Shagged Me a little bit more then? So, I mean, if we're talking about Austin Powers himself, he's a very difficult character to talk about because he's basically just playing
the
exactly
same
the
thing.
same personality. There isn't really much of a change. This is very much a sequel, I would say, that if you liked the first one, you'll probably love this one. A lot of the jokes are the same. It follows that kind of sequel thing. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of new jokes, as we mentioned, new characters, which we'll get into in our discussion later with Mini-Me and Fat Bastard as sort of like the big new additions to the cast. But you've got the same kind of title sequence. There's a lot of the same jokes, and even a lot of the jokes that are brought into it in this film are then repeated again in Goldmember. But as I mentioned last week, they do feel fresh in a way. They're familiar, but the whole context and the whole setup of the scene is so different that even though you know the punchline, even though you know the angle that the joke's probably going to go, it's still funny. And that's what I really respect about this film. You know, you have the whole Will Ferrell scene again, which was a carryover
Yeah.
from the first film, but I would go so far as to say this one's even funnier, even to the point where Will Ferrell gets the end credits stint at the end. You get a bit of a voiceover where he's addressing the audience in the cinema saying like, hello, I'm still here, like, can someone help in the audience? Like, I don't know, it still feels fresh despite being familiar and kind of samey in some respects, if that makes any kind of sense at all.
No, no, you're right. 'Cause I think if you look at the opening scene, you know, without sort of going into it fully, you've got like the return of the fembots. In theory, you've got another character coming back who's obviously going to get written out. You've got the whole like the nudes. What would you call that? Like they obviously place the object for the punchline about him being naked, and
Yeah, they did
it's
that at
like
the end of the first one, didn't they, as well? With
yeah,
it.
and it's like we'll do the whole opening credits on it, and we'll still make ridiculous credits. And I think they knew what people enjoyed, and they were happy to repeat it. But I think they repeated it in a way. We didn't get six fembots in a room in the climax. We got the opening scene with a character that carried over. We got the new joke in the opening scene, and I think it's one of those things where the pacing of it worked because I think when you get comedy sequels that tend to backfire, it's the placement of the jokes being at the exact same time in every film. You'll get to the exact same moment and know this is where this is going to kick in. And I don't think this does it. Not that there's a formula to follow, but you know, this film has time travel like the first, and I guess you can say in these other things. But I think they introduce enough new things whilst bringing back older ones to blend into one and work together. And I think with Austin Powers, you don't need to change anything about him. You don't want him to change either. I think when you've got comedy characters, some people will say, they should develop and whatnot. I think Dumb and Dumber is probably a good example. 20 years have passed. Okay, things might be different, would be different, should be different. But when it's 2 years later, Hangover, I'll go to Hangover again. Hangover 2 was just the same film again. It didn't work. Austin Powers 2, yeah, it's another Bond parody, but it's not the exact same Bond parody as before. They're able to take elements from other Bond films, and I think that's why it stays so fresh. But like a James Bond film, the actor doesn't change. There's no 180 evolution with him. It's not, it is that sort of classic, this is how this Bond is. And I think that's the beauty of Austin Powers, is that he doesn't ever need to change. It's the world's changed around him.
Yeah, and I think, because it is based on James Bond, and the James Bond films, at least before we got to the Craig ones, were fundamentally episodic. It's very easy to kind of carry on with, James Bond's made 25 films off the back of that it's, it's the same type of character, it's the same type of situations, or, new female leads and quippiness or whatever it happens to be. It's just a slightly different adventure each time. So I think Austin Powers as a comedy of that can get away with that. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it's kind of samey in the context of it. I mean, in each of these films, in all three of the films, there are some kind of time traveling elements in some way. The first film, it starts off in the 60s, he's cryogenically frozen, wakes up in the 90s, and boom, you've got your fish out of water kind of storyline where he's having to adjust. In this one, you have a literal time machine that's built and he goes back to the 60s. And then in the next one, it's another time machine, isn't it? It's a time traveling car. I think that it's like the DeLorean kind of thing. He goes back to the 70s. So I definitely think that's a staple of the Austin Powers films, where if it was all set in modern day, I don't think it would work. You need that spin. You need to take him back to like his familiar surroundings of either the 60s or the 70s, or some kind of garish, in your face, psychedelic kind of aspect to the character, because that is a massive aspect to the character. And I'll say as well, I mean, this just stands to Mike Myers' comedic talents, at least back then, before he made all those horrible films I mentioned. Just the fact of all the characters that he plays in this one. And, in the other one, he played two characters wildly different with Austin Powers and Dr. Evil. In this one, he has even more to contend with as well, and prosthetics to work through as well. And this also being the only Austin Powers film to get an Oscar nomination as well for Best Makeup.
Yeah.
I don't think it won. I think it was just nominated, but I think he was in like the Fat Bastard costume for like 2.5 hours plus at a time. And it looks great. It does look really convincing. I guess 90s fat suit technology really took off with the likes of Nutty Professor and, this film. And also I found out that he has I don't know if he's credited for this, he probably isn't, an uncredited fourth cameo in the film in some way as a voiceover. and he does the voice of the astronaut in the opening scene when the big boy rocket flies up and he goes,
Oh,
"Oh my
really?
gentle Jesus." That's Mike Myers doing the voice of that. I never knew that until today, so I'm still discovering new things about this film. And talking about discovering new things about this film, right before we went live tonight, I actually saw the teaser trailer for this film for the first time, which I think is definitely worth talking about if we're going to use that as a segue to start talking about Dr. Evil.
Yeah, Carl, who's normally in the comments, sent us a tweet. I think he's watching Ghostbusters tonight. I think he's at an early screening, so I hope he's enjoying it. But he tweets me, goes, "Did you ever see this with the Phantom Menace?" Now, obviously, I was quite little. I saw Phantom Menace at the cinema, but I'm surprised I've never seen this trailer. What a parody! It's a teaser of Doctor. It's summer '99. There's a big Death Star. There's Darth Vader breathing. There's a big intense voiceover. Star Wars. Star Wars. You know, if you're going to go to the cinema this year, watch one film, Star Wars. Obviously, May '99, there was no bigger film coming out that year at all. You know, in same thing, 2015, there was no bigger film coming out 2015 than Force Awakens. Like, it's a gargantuan event. And then it turns around and it's Dr. Evil. So if you're going to watch the second film, you watch Austin Powers. And what a beautiful way to drop a teaser film. Because I think some films did it in 2015. I can't remember what they are to my head, but I remember in 2015 there was a lot of Star Wars parodies that were being used in marketing ploys. I'm just trying to remember some of the big ones off the top of my head, but I think not only does it show obviously how big Star Wars is, but the fact this film can use that, and it just works because this film is already a parody of James Bond, so why not a parody of Star Wars?
There's a lot of
Yeah.
Star Wars references in this film, even down to
Yes.
the opening. I mean, you've got the crawl with the voiceover from
Yeah.
the late great Tony Jay, one of my favorite voice actors. Does the voice of Judge Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame. Amazing voice actor. His like deep booming, almost Christopher Lee kind of voice over the intro. The fact that they openly call it a Death Star in the film with his plan.
Yeah.
There's the "I am your father" line, and there's probably some other ones in there that I'm even forgetting now, but I don't know. I just love it. I love that they managed to get so many in there, you know?
I think it's intentional that it's 99, and that's only just clicked. I know the whole "I'm Your Father" one was the big one, but yeah, the fact there's a literal Death Star, and I think that's what makes it so great is that they not just take the piss out of it, but you've got like Scott Evil just sat there the entire time. Like, do you not realize this? And it's just so funny knowing that we know it's a film, but they don't know it in the late 60s yet. And I just loved all that kind of stuff. And I'll say this, I don't think George Lucas loved parodies. If anyone had the 2011 Blu-ray box set, you'll know that there was a disc dedicated to parodies of Star Wars. And it had everything from that 70s show to, oh God, the stop animation one with Seth Green.
Oh, Robot Chicken?
Robot Chicken, that's it. And obviously Seth Green was going to get a Star Wars show, which was, there's 100+ episodes in the can. And the takeover happened, so they never ever got aired. And it's one of the things where you can understand why Lucas loves stuff like this. And let's be honest with Austin Powers, it's a parody, but I don't think it's not that it's not self-harm parody, but there's nothing really malicious in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I genuinely think it is just an actor having fun with what he's allowed to write. And I think that's why, I know it's kind of off topic, but I love George Lucas that he just didn't mind people having a laugh at his work. He'd get involved in it himself. And I think it's things like that that to me really make it better. And I know it's again off point, but we spoke last year with that Star Wars Lego watch along on Disney. Like, wow, Disney are letting them mock themselves for the first time. And it's that welcoming thing that once you can accept self-mockery, then you can move on. And I think Austin Powers to then start going for the sci-fi films as well as Bond was just amazing. And obviously a lot of Moonraker references, the whole moon. There's like a space shuttle as well, the silvery suits. I like what they're doing with it. And again, it's so different to the first one because the first one was parodying You Only Live Twice more than anything. It just made the right jump of changing the setting for the parody.
Yeah, and I think it makes it more enjoyable when I was watching it as a kid as well. Now, granted, in 1999, I was discovering Star Wars for the first time through Phantom Menace, but, after that, I went back to the original. So even as a kid, and I think that's why the "I am your father" line is just so, I mean, everyone's quoting that, aren't they? Like in films, whether it be parody, whether it be
99,
whatever. So,
Toy Story 2.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah. So even as a kid, you're kind of aware, like, I've seen Star Wars. I like it's like the Captain America meme. Like I understand that reference even from a young age, and I think that kind of adds to your enjoyment with it. Because if you love Star Wars as a kid and you become more aware of it, you can kind of understand what they're doing, and you're understanding the notion of a parody and what it is they're trying to do. So I don't know. Maybe all those ingredients kind of went into it as well. To sort of like aid the enjoyment as a kid. I'm going to bring up Yanis's comment here. He says, Mike Myers is perfect as Austin Powers. So sexy, so horny, baby. Yes, he is. He's incredible in these films. And I guess that segues onto the next Mike Myers character in the film with Fat Bastard. Makes his introduction in this film. He weighs a metric ton. He is incredible. And if you watch Shrek, which every living, breathing person probably has, it's the precursor to Shrek. It's Shrek. 1 year away, wasn't it? Was that 2000 the first Shrek film came out?
2000, 2001 maybe. It was definitely like right on the turn of the century. And it's quite scary going back to this, that it was literally, can you please play Fat Bastard on audio? And it's amazing. I think because of how big Shrek is in pop culture, how big those films were at the time as well, before they became memes like so many of the great films from the early noughties. It's the fact that it was literally just I don't even playing the same guys. He's just doing a Scottish accent, but he's really good at doing a Scottish accent. You look at the amount of celebrities that do stuff like SNL that are terrible doing accents outside America. You wouldn't think Mike Myers wasn't Scottish with the way he does it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it definitely has some of the most quotable lines for me. I mentioned at the beginning, like with my mate, we still quote lines from it now, or even just in my day to day, like I still go like "get in my belly" sometimes when I'm like sat down for dinner or whatever. It's incredible with some of the stuff in this, and definitely some of the most laugh out loud scenes for me. And I mentioned last week, sort of going back to these films, I'm always worried if I'm going to enjoy it as much as I remember, or if I'm still going to laugh at the parts that I meant to. I will say, watching this one, I'm torn between whether I like this one more than the first one or the first one more than this one, watching them again fairly recently. I think it's like the Ace Ventura and Ace Ventura When Nature Calls thing with me, that When Nature Calls is probably funnier than the first one overall in terms of joke for jokes, but I think the overall better film is probably the first one. It's as you mentioned, because it has a bit more of an edge to it, and I think with International Man of Mystery, it was a higher rated certificate than this one. I think when it first came out, it was a 15 compared to these ones, which are a 12A, and the same with Goldmember. But I still love this film, and a lot of it comes from Fat Bastard. Definitely one of my favorite parts. And I guess I'm a sucker for toilet humor still. Watching Dumb and Dumber will attest to that. I still bust a gut every single time with that moment in Dumb and Dumber. But it's when he goes on that huge spiel at the end, and it's playing like the really sad music. It's like, when you're an overweight child in a society that demands perfection, and he goes off on this tangent, and he just lets out this slow fart, and it gets me every time. I just crack up laughing, and it still got me to this day. So yeah, absolutely. Fat Bastard gets some of the best moments in this film. And the makeup is really good. Like, you would never think that a film like this would ever be nominated for an Academy Award in any respect, but absolutely for the makeup, it's tremendous. And that bit in the bed as well, when
I was
he's
just
with
say
Felicity,
it's disgusting,
it's gross.
which is a credit to how great that makeup is.
Yeah.
And the Oscars, they've never hid from comedies. I remember Bad Grandpa got a makeup nomination. It's literally just Johnny Knoxville in an old man costume. And
Suicide Squad wins. I know it's not a comedy, but
wow, yeah, and it's just the characters are right, and it's what you get a Bond for. Right? Who's the new henchman? Who's going to come into it? And you don't get just one classic character. In this one, you're going to get two. And I think I think the reason why it works even more is because obviously Fat Bastard's so big. We'll get to Goldmember next week, but you want someone that's so far opposite from everyone else. You need someone that is a metric. The fact they introduce him as a metric ton, and that when he falls to the floor, there'll be a sound effect of and everyone's shaking and everything. It's just so funny. And then you get Mini Me, which is sorry, I've got to bring this comment. Did Fat Bastard play Baron in June '84? I saw a great tweet recently, and they had the quotes from Dune, but they had a photo of Fat Bastard topless. And it does look like him when I've seen the photos, but I think by bringing in Mini-Me with Fat Bastard, you have the biggest polar opposites in history. a literal mini version of Dr. Evil and an obese henchman. And I think it's the comedy like that works so well, is that they are so different from one another. But just the invention of Mini-Me, like in the first film, you've had the disappointing son, who is your like, what do they say? Like it's his semen, but it's also, I guess, in this film, an actual proper son, conceived in the late 60s. But just, I don't even, where do you start with the characters like Mini-Me? Like Vern Troy, like Arrested Soul, absolute legend. He gave us an iconic character. And it is just the fact he's just copying, like awkwardly copying Mike Myers. Like the invention of a character that is just a smaller version of an evil man is just incredible. And I don't know why it's hard to talk about, because it's such a simple premise. Yet it's one that, I mean, I know there's Nick Nack in Bond, but imagine if Nick Nack, was Christopher Lee, but small. And that's where the logic is with me. Like, I don't know. I can't really talk about him because I just think he's incredible.
Yeah, Vern Troyer was great in this. And it's like the physicality he brings to it as well, like how rabid and unpredictable Mini-Me is. In some parts, he can play the cutesy kind of side of Mini-Me, and then all of a sudden, like, he's going for Seth Green's character, and he's like holding up the middle finger or something. Or the bit where he attacks Austin Powers as well, which again is probably one of my favorite scenes. I'm jumping all over the place here. I'm like giving away all of my favorite scenes, and I know that Vern Troyer didn't do the voice of Mini-Me, but it's the sounds he makes as well. The little like that kind of sound.
Never properly speaks.
No, and I love that fact. Like, that would take away from the character if he did. But the bit where he's on the chair and then he's like hanging from the rafters, and he's like, "Oh God, somebody fetch the stick," and he's like trying to like hook him down. But honestly, I think my favorite bit from this film, one of my favorite shots, and it's just so blunt, and it's the ragdoll physics that do it every time for me. It's when he's fighting Austin Powers, and it's one of my favorite sort of like pratfalls or whatever you want to call it, slapstick moments in probably comedy history. And it's where Austin throws him at the metal pole, and he's just like unconscious on the floor. It's so blunt and comes out of nowhere. It's the sound effect of him like clonking the pole, and then he's just out cold on the floor. Love it. It's just, oh God. He's brilliant.
I think every scene he's in, the fact he has a rivalry with Scott Evil from the first second, I think just makes it instantly great. And you've got this like father-son dynamic going on to the other son, and I think it's a really good back and forth for what they're trying to do. But even he gets the final fight scene, like he like rips the hole in his trousers and like just goes into his bodysuit. It's the things like that that just make it funny. And what I'll say with this film, not to get into like modern day humor, the film's not mocking the fact he's small. They're not saying they're like the wrong terms, not insulting his height. He is Dr. Evil, so he's a villain in that sense of things. And I think that's quite brave, because a character like that is very tricky to pull off. Like, not saying unoffensively, but I don't think they're offending anybody with Mini-Me in this film. And I think that's where that's where the best comedy comes from, is how intelligent the people writing it is. And because he fits into all the other jokes, when they want to use his height for the humor, it's him crawling across the table. It's not anything else. And the fact that what do they say? Like, he bites, he's trying to like bite the cat. But I think so much of it comes down to Vern Troyer. The performance, like, it's what you said, the noises, but I think it's his eyes as well. That it's the way he'll look around, and it's just incredible. There's not a character like it, is there? Let's be absolutely honest. In the history of cinema, comics, whatever, there's nothing like Mini-Me.
I know we need to talk about the female lead in this as well, but because we're kind of like on the concept of the villains, I want to talk about Rob Lowe as a young number 2 as well. He's brilliant in this film. Now, I always wondered if it was actually Robert Wagner's voice, like, kind of, and then
I thought that
dubbed it. No, he perfected that impression, and I found out as well, Rob Lowe used to date one of Robert Wagner's daughters as well. So for a time, I don't know how long he dated her for, whether he even met the guy, but almost like a father-in-law kind of thing for at least a spell. So he would have got to meet him maybe.
It's because they didn't go on a boat with him.
Yeah, yes, Jesus Christ. But honestly, I don't remember loving Rob Lowe's character as much as I did sort of like rewatching this thing. The bit where Dr. Evil's bouncing the globe and keeps smacking him in the face with it. He's like, "You're gonna cry? You're gonna cry? Huh? You're gonna cry?" And he keeps smacking him in the face. It's a really good impression, and I like that. we get to see like a younger number 2 as well. You get the great joke as well where you find Frau Farbissina, and she's played exactly by the same actress. There is no younger version. She is the younger version of Frau's character. Yeah, I just wanted to mention him because I thought it was a really good impression. And actually, I will say sort of like the younger versions of character. Yeah, no, exactly. It was really good. I was going to say in Goldmember, the younger versions of the characters they get is probably one of the best bits of the film. That's something that the series has always done really well, I think.
And I think the fact that Rob Lowe was in that first one, we know the scene was cut to the American audiences, but not here, which is still a really interesting thing that they did. I don't know why that was. And it's like that's an even better reason for them to bring him back into it. And I love Rob Lowe. If you've seen Parks and Rec, you'll know him as Chris Traeger. He's on the best characters on the show. Wonderful character, and it's just amazing to see him young because I've never seen him when he was young in things, and I know that he was very much like a teenage like 80s star type thing that dropped off after a few like personal stuff. And it's one of them where in this he just naturally does it really well. But the fact he's nailed that voice and gone for it, if he can convince other people, because you think in a film like this it would be a dub, because films do that for comedy. They want it to look awkward or uncomfortable, but the fact it's not is actually quite terrifying how good that is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess that covers the villains. I mean, Frau's still great in there, and Will Ferrell as well. I'll probably talk about that scene again before the end of this review. Let's move on to the new female lead for this film then. So we've got Heather Graham playing Felicity Shagwell. Now, was it Shagwell by name, Shag very well by reputation, which is one of her introducing lines in this film. I like her character. Now, I will say I don't like her as much as Liz Hurley. I really like Vanessa, wasn't it, in the first film? But it goes with the whole James Bond thing. And I think actually Mike Myers did want to bring back Liz Hurley as the main female lead again to have some continuity. I think she had like a bunch of projects lined up at the time. Her scheduling wouldn't allow for it. But she managed to clear a window in her schedule to come back and do that cameo at the beginning of the film. So I like that they acknowledge it. It's a complete, just like, it makes no sense to the context of the character and what we know about Liz Hurley's character from the first film. But this film is so cartoony and, I don't care. Like, I can suspend my disbelief when it comes to a film like Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. It's fine. But I like Heather Graham. She crops up every now and then. I think she's a pretty good comedy actress. And interestingly, I don't know how much of this is true on IMDb. I was reading through some of the trivia. Apparently, she was a struggling actress at the time, and she was about to sign up for like a softcore porn film at the time.
Boogie Nights. I know that was the big breakthrough for her, I think.
No, that was like an actual film. She was going to do like an actual porn film.
Oh.
And then apparently she signed up to this one. And apparently when she got her paycheck after doing this film, the first thing that she did was buy a copy of that porn film to see the film that she could have been in had she have not done Austin Powers. So if that's true, that's absolutely incredible, that bit of information. But I think she's fine. She's serviceable in the film. She has some good moments in there, I think.
I quite like her. I think I think I've not seen Boogie Nights. I've seen clips from it. And I think they know what they're going to get with it. I always think that she's, I guess, say it again, Hangover. I know she's in the first one. And I think she's one of those actors where she just has a visible personality you want in a comedy. And I think she's so she naturally looks like she's fitting in the 60s when she's in their clothing stuff, in the same way that Beyonce suits the 70s stuff, Elizabeth Hurley suits, I know it's just set in modern day, but they've nailed the casting, and I think she's different enough from Elizabeth Hurley. You are right, though. Who is the best one of the two? I think it's probably the first film. Also, I completely forgot Elizabeth Hurley was obviously with Hugh Grant at the time, which was one of the biggest celebrity couples, I think, until some stuff happened. And it's really interesting to see how her career took off. And I'm not going to say Austin Powers is a stain on it, but she's, when you get like an actress or someone famous, think, wow, like they were in a film once, like this film once, and I kind of had that effect, like it didn't clock that she was like the media darling that everyone loved. And whereas, not that it's a criticism on Heather Graham, it's like I see her doing comedies, I see her in this like raunchy role with Austin Powers type thing, and I think that's why it works. I think she was so well suited to it. The fact it's called The Spy Who Shagged Me as well, it's essentially about her, even though it's not. And the name Felicity Shagwell, I think not many people would take on a character name like that, but I think she just does wonders for this film, and she just brings like energy to it. And I think her and Mike Myers have the best chemistry of any of across the three films of any two people.
Yeah, no, I do like the chemistry between them, and I think that might be aided by like the montage in the song as well for some of the music. I mentioned it before. It's one of my favorite Madonna songs, actually, "Beautiful Stranger." I don't know if you've seen the music video for it as well, but there's a lot of sort of great Mike Myers, Austin Powers moments in that. It's almost like a short film at the beginning kind of thing, like he's on a mission, and Madonna's there as well. It's a great music video. It's a wonderful song, and I think it won a Grammy or something the following year. And I always say, and I know you're going to disagree with me on this one because I know you love the song, to me, Madonna wrote a better kind of Bond song, if you will, for Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, than she did for Die Another Day. But that's a conversation for another time. It's a conversation we've already had probably on the Die Another Day review. And, you know, Felicity Shagwell as well. I wanted to bring this character as well. Not the only amusingly named female character in this film, because you do have Ivana Humpalot as well, which is a great scene at the beginning with the modeling. And oh God, what's her name? Real life model and actress Rebecca Romaine, who plays Mystique. Yeah. I remember sort of like, you know, obviously I saw this film from a young age and the X-Men films. I never put two and two together. And I don't know what age it would have been where, you know, seeing the cast Rebecca Romaine go in, I know that name, that's in Austin Powers too. And then having that, you know, that realization that she played Mystique all along. But yeah, no, I think I remember like finding that out and it kind of blowing my mind at the time. Not the same level where I found out the little kid from Batman Begins was Joffrey Baratheon. After all, that still takes the cake, I think, for realization. But yeah,
I think everyone had that with Joffrey. I think that's probably the biggest like look back in the past type thing. I don't know. That sounds really weird, but there might be a big one in the future. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a little kid cameo somewhere that ends up being like an A-lister. But it is one of those things that like Joffrey was the kid from Batman Begins. We've gone through a lot of the characters. Let's talk about you mentioned you bought the soundtrack, so I want to talk about the music. Now, I'm not going to lie, I don't remember much of the soundtrack. The third one, Goldmember, I'm a bit more with, but by the main theme, it all just blends into that 60s thing for me.
Yeah, so for the music for me, Beautiful Stranger, I bought the soundtrack specifically for that song. I like the song American Woman by Lenny Kravitz, that's fine. Apparently there was a Mel B song on the album called Word Up, when, you know, she was trying to be relevant after Spice Girls. I don't remember that at all. And I think the song I used to listen to as well is called Espionage by Green Day. I didn't realize it was by Green Day until now. I never paid attention to like who did songs or whatnot growing up. It's like, if I like this song, I will just listen to the song. I won't research it or know who did it or whatnot. I think it plays during the car chase right before Will Ferrell's attack. There's like a kind of hard rock riff that kicks in that kind of sounds like a spy movie. I think that's the one, Espionage by Green Day. You've got I'll Never Fall in Love Again by Burt Bacharach and Elvis Costello in a nice moment that kind of refers back to the first film. And then the Quincy Jones Soul Bossa Nova Austin Powers theme, which I'm glad that is the Austin Powers theme, isn't it? Like, you can't have an Austin Powers film without that kicking in somewhere. But yeah, honestly, it's Beautiful Stranger is still a song that I go back to now, you know, and listen to every now and then. I absolutely love that song. I think we've just had a comment come up, haven't we? Let me just check. Yanis says Elizabeth Hurley was stunning in the first movie, one of the most beautiful Bond/Powers girls of all time. I will agree with that, good sir. I will totally agree with that. Favorite scenes, and you know, we can't say the whole movie because there are so many great moments, but anything that we haven't discussed that sticks out to you as one of the funniest scenes or one of your most enjoyable scenes?
I'll give you a scene I didn't like. I know that sounds really horrible.
Oh, okay. Go on.
I didn't like the time travel Austin Powers 10 minutes from now. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe I've seen that kind of humor too much in the past, but I mean, the film still works, so you can ignore me for saying that. But oh my God, that's a tough. What is the best? I think it's got to be Minnie's introduction and him on the table when he's biting. And I think does she spray him with
with a water bottle?
Like a water bottle thing. I just think anything with the money, it's just taking in like that character, and there's so much fun there, and you can tell Mike Myers is having so much fun playing I feel like in this film he's having more fun playing Dr. Evil than he is playing Austin Powers. That sounds really dumb. He's probably enjoying all of it, but there's something about Dr. Evil in this film where I feel like he's giving it more than he did in the first one. Not that he wasn't giving it anyway in the first, but it just clicked in this. That it just jumped to that next level. and I'm just going to do the mini me, and it's how happy he is with mini me when he first meets him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a guy getting his first dog or something, isn't
it? Oh god, I'm trying to think of some other moments. I'm going to rattle through this really quickly. The Jerry Springer scene at the intro with Dr. Evil on there are, again, like watching it as a kid, just crying with laughing when it, like, the swear words are bleeped out and he's just going crazy and like beating everyone up. That has definitely aged a lot now, because I know that Jerry Springer was massive during the 90s and probably into the early 2000s as well. So that definitely dates the film, but I still find it funny to this day. He's like, why did you run out on me, Dad? Because you're not quite evil enough. It's like, you're the Diet Coke of evil. Just 1 calorie, not evil enough. There's that scene. Oh, God. The silhouette scene, which they repeat in Goldmember, which I think is still equally as brilliant in Goldmember, where it, the guards are outside, like looking in horror what's going on inside that tent. The gerbil, which reminds me of Lemmy Winks now. You got the bit with the mallet where she's packing everything back in. It's hilarious. I love that. And I think the Will Ferrell scene, he's brilliant in this. I mentioned last week, I wonder if they brought him back because he'd kind of become a lot more successful. Yeah, I'm glad they brought him back. That bit where the same question 3 times. He can't stand to be asked it. It just irritates him. And it's the battle cry that me and my friend always like just lose our minds at. So he's like, my name is Mustafa and I'm the man who will be killing you now. Pulls out like this knife, like, Datalia! Just charges at him. That's something we always quote all the time. And I think it's probably the Johnson gag as well, where it's like, what's that? I don't know, but it looks like a giant Willie. What's that? And it goes, it just goes on and on and on. Apparently they screened that to test audiences, and the audience loved it so much that they went back and added more to just keep it going. Because it is repeated twice within the film, isn't it? So I'm wondering if that's where they started adding more stuff in. That's funny. And again, that's something they repeat, not to the same degree as this one in Goldmember, but again, as a kid, that just lost my mind at it. Thought it was hilarious.
Because the two have blended, is this the one with the Osbournes?
That's the next one. That's Goldmember.
And Woody Harrelson is also the next one.
Woody Harrelson's in this one.
This one. Because he this week, he has just guest starred in Curb Enthusiasm for a whole episode.
Oh, has he?
And I was like, Woody Harrelson doing comedy against great. I know he's only got like 1 line in that, but Woody Harrelson just pops up these days and I absolutely love him. But he'd make a great Austin Powers villain if they wanted to do another Dr. Evil. Don't know how
they could do it.
Yeah, so he's on them, but there's so many funny scenes. You mentioned the tent one, actually. That's one I kind of forgot about. When you see the context, and I don't think it works as well in the second. I say the second one, the third one, I guess. But it's going back to that in the following films, they do the jokes again, but it's done differently. It's not the exact same setup, and I like the fact they introduce newer jokes in this that they can then carry over and go for it again. But yeah, the tent scene is actually sticking out now. Once you've mentioned it, it's just being right up there. And Jerry Springer, you can't go with Jerry Springer. I think when you look at the show, I mean, I used to watch it all the time, like summer holidays when I was younger. It would always be repeated on TV. And the fact they did that with the cast, it just makes it. You think it's going to be like a 30-second scene, but it's not. It goes on and on and on, and it's amazing. And that's the sort of the Mike Myers pull that he has to people. And I can imagine Jerry Springer. He did a lot of cameos here and there over the years, but Mike Myers being, can I bring Austin Powers characters onto your show? I think that hits differently.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, there's probably, hundreds more moments that I can't think of right now that just get a laugh out of me. I guess if we go on to like final thoughts now, rewatching these together, I think I did slightly, and I was surprised about this. I enjoyed going back to the first one and watching that more than this one. And I don't know if that's just a case of, as I mentioned last week, I have watched this movie to death. I know pretty much every line, every joke, everything that's lining up. Whereas the first one, I never watched that as much as a kid, so it felt fresher going back to it, and maybe that's what I'm kind of hanging on to. But I will agree with you that I think this is, if it's not quite up to the standard of International Man of Mystery, it's either on par, just slightly underneath, but it's still equally as hilarious and introduces a whole lot of new stuff as well, which is like a staple of the Austin Powers series now, with the likes of, Mini-Me and Fat Bastard in there. There's some genuinely laugh out loud moments in this still, and I like that it's held up. And there are some dumb moments, but I mean, it's the Austin Powers trilogy, and that's the kind of humor that I'm into. So yeah, there's still a lot of enjoyment to be had with this one, and it is one of those films from my youth that, among many other films, but certainly this is probably the film that I know and can recollect watching over and over again, night after night after night. I think my next door neighbor used to have it as well, and he used to be an Austin Powers fan as well. And we'd both kind of mention like watching it every single night and be like, "Oh, what part did you get up to last night? Oh, I got up to the volcano scene. Oh, I got to this scene." And yeah, definitely a big like staple of my childhood growing up with this film. So I think it's always going to be a comedy film that's near and dear to me for sure.
I think it's one of the few great comedy sequels. There aren't that many of them in absolute hindsight. You can probably count them on two hands if you really want to look into it. But this is right up there. And going back to again, post Bond, not seeing these for so many years, it's funny. And you get a lot of comedies that don't age well. And they were very funny back then. And I think it's not even the quality of the jokes, it's just time hasn't benefited that film. Whereas this film is still so relevant. It's still very funny. It's contextually funny and objectively funny. And I think that's why I've got so much time for it. The characters are great. And with comedies, it's about you want to spend time with the characters. And I think because they bring in such a vast amount of like insane personalities, it just really adds to the experience of being able to watch them. And again, when you're bringing in people like Fat Bastard and Mini Me, and it's a sequel, and they're like big enough characters to have done what one each film, or you could have marked everything. But the fact this one went balls to the wall, all out. Here's another Austin Powers film. There's so much respect about it, and there's a reason why there was a third one, because this one obviously was so successful. And how many comedy trilogies are there? I guess that's the question to be asking, because it's a hell of a lot of comedy sequels, but you don't get trilogies all too often these days. And I had a lot of fun with this, and it is one I'm really tempted to rewatch again soon, but there's just so much to watch at the moment.
Yeah, and if just to end on like the box office and everything, the first film, 16.5 mil budget, made just under 70. So still successful for a comedy. This film, 33 mil budget, 312 mil box office. That's a huge increase right there. So of course you're going to get a sequel going, and it's nice that it picked up an audience between that first film to this one, and a lot of people love it and still love it and talk about it to this day and have a lot of fun memories with it, and all the better for it. So that'll do it for our review on Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. And now we want to hear from you guys. Let us know what you think of Austin Powers. Is this your favorite? Which one is your favorite? Who's your favorite character, favorite joke, anything regarding the Austin Powers trilogy? Please do let us know. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe as always. And to conclude the Austin Powers trilogy, well, at least until they come out with the fourth film, hopefully in the near future. Next week, of course, we'll be back once again Tuesday at 8 p.m. GMT for our review on Austin Powers Goldmember. That's going to be Tuesday, the 23rd of November. And that'll be closing us out nicely before we end kind of our grand master plan of all the James Bond films, of all the parodies and everything that we want to cover for right now. There might be some more in the future. And then obviously we'll be ending with Johnny English right after that. So a couple more weeks of the James Bond parodies to come. So definitely stick around. And George, what else do we have coming up on the channel? We have a lot of stuff, but what's at least some of this stuff?
We're also 2 films into another comedy series, I guess Ghostbusters. The third one, the new one, Afterlife, is coming out in cinemas this Thursday. We're going to have a review next Monday, the 22nd. That'll be me, you, and probably Dave, with the 3 of us who've done the first 2 films. You can check them out on the channel. There's a playlist in the franchise parts for Ghostbusters films. And another trilogy starting tomorrow evening. Not a comedy trilogy, but very up there with comedy in today's culture. Of course, tonight, there's going to be a trailer dropping for a big film called Spider-Man No Way Home. And there's only 2 reasons why people are hyped. One is Tobey Maguire, 2 is Andrew Garfield. And tomorrow, the timing couldn't be better for us. We kickstart Spider-Man reviews. This was weeks before the trailer was announced. We had these dates on the go. So we are not cashing in on that. This has been planned out. Every Wednesday from tomorrow will be one new Spider-Man review on the channel. We'll start off with the Raimi trilogy. We'll be doing Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. And we might have to change a few dates because the release date changed for the new film too, which is going to clash with one of those. So if you like your Spider-Man stuff, come back in tomorrow. We've pre-recorded, as Chris said earlier. I'm not going to blow smoke up our ass. It was a fantastic discussion. It went over for 2 hours. Yeah. But there's a lot to talk about with that film and memories of it, the film itself, their legacy. So if you have enjoyed these longer type discussions, the fact we've almost an hour on Austin Powers is shocking.
I know, it's mad.
2 hours on Spider-Man tomorrow. And as we said, there's a trailer coming out tonight. So it might have even had benefited by the timing. And I'm going to hand back over to Chris to speak about the other retrospective happening on the channel as well.
Yep, so we're also going through all of the Peter Jackson films in the lead up to December, which of course is going to be Lord of the Rings month. We are up to his 4th feature this upcoming Thursday. That's going to be Heavenly Creatures review. That's Thursday, the 18th of November at the slightly later time of 10 p.m. GMT. It's been an absolute blast going through a lot of his films. It's been eye-opening for sure. Sort of like going back to those grassroots history of Peter Jackson's filmmaking. And with this one, it's getting into his dramas, his autobiographical dramas, which probably gave him more credence for directing The Lord of the Rings, because so far from what I've seen, no idea how that guy got to direct that trilogy. But, you know, we're a couple of films away from The Lord of the Rings. It'll be Heavenly Creatures this week and The Frighteners the following week. So continuing for all of those weeks and into January as well, we're going to be covering the Peter Jackson films every single Thursday at 10 p.m. We have a lot of other stuff in the pipeline, but that'll do it for right now, because otherwise these outros are going to be like 15 minutes long listing all the stuff. But obviously follow us on our social medias as well. They're going across the bottom of the screen right now. That's Twitter at cinema_savvy and Facebook and letterbox.com/cinemasavvy. We've got a lot of other videos planned in December as well, not just Lord of the Rings, plenty of other trilogies that we're going to go through as well to tie in with certain films, as well as everything else in between. So thank you to everyone that's watched tonight, followed along. Last comment, Yanis mentions Lord of the Rings. Hell yeah, stick around in the month of December, my friend. There'll be plenty of content for you. That'll do it for us right now. Until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.